today, again, if you excuse me, I would like to do something even more than 2 days ago, very classical, a little bit boring with long quotes. I would like to approach this eternal Althusserian topic of ideological state apparatuses as the material existence of an ideology, and then I will try to show where Althusser falls short a little bit, and how we can go on. From Althusser I will pass to late Kant, Kantian anthropology, what he calls anthropology, which, I agree here with Michel Foucault, is maybe the most subversive aspect of Kantian philosophy. You will see why. And from then on, I will go into some concluding remarks about the status of subject, subjectivity, and so on, with special view on today's political situation. So let me begin. You know that Louis Althusser's theory of ideology, the late one, the earlier one, it's another point, has two aspects. One is ideological state apparatuses, the basic point of Louis Althusser being that when traditional Marxists are talking about try to be materialists, that they nonetheless are still idealists in the sense that they miss the proper materiality of ideology. For example, a traditional Marxist, when he deals with a religious edifice, he will, of course, try to ground a religion in economic, social circumstances, power relations. He will try to show how an abstract idea of salvation, guilt, whatever, is rooted in concrete historical circumstances. On the one hand, exploitation, religion as legitimization of power relations. On the other hand, utopian hopes. And here already, I'm tempted to, I developed this in my old books, to shift a little bit the accent. What fascinated me always is, I mean, everyone knows the story of decay, how some original, authentic experience, artistic, spiritual, whatever, gets corrupted, gets instrumentalized as ideology to legitimize some power relations, whatever. But what always fascinated me much more, and Althusser all the time, Louis Althusser saw this, is the opposite direction of how something which clearly is a fake, consciously manipulated, can catch on and become something quite authentic. And if there is someone here from Mexico, I hope that he will agree with me. If not, he better shut up. That, you know, wasn't there in Mexico already in the late 16th century that Virgin of Guadalupe or whatever, Virgin Mary, appearing as black virgin. I think this is exactly the moment when Christianity will, which till that point was clearly just an instrument of Spanish oppression, blah, blah, became also a voice for the articulation of dreams, of horrors to which the local indigenous population was submitted. You know, it was no longer from that point on Catholic religion simply just an instrument for oppression. It also became a way for the oppressed themselves to articulate those utopias. And one has to say that in contrast to European corruption, mostly, overall, the image of Catholic Church in Latin America is not as bad as one could have expected. For example, a Latin American friend showed me already years ago one of the CIA documents which were declassified, you know, this 30-year period, from the 60s is the document. Around the turn of the century it was declassified, where a CIA analyst says clearly that, forget about Marxism, the true danger to the US interests is liberation theology and the left wing of the Catholic Church. They perceive that as much more dangerous. So again, this moment interests me much more. Not how first it was an authentic experience, then it gets corrupted, but how And you will see this is what Kant is talking about, surprisingly, as something which, again, can begin as undoubtedly corrupted and so on, or just means of ideological oppression, manipulation, can get, as it were, caught into a different way. So, again, back to Althusser. We have, with Althusserian theory of ideology, two levels. One is the so-called ideological interpellation. How the fundamental mechanism of ideology is that we are addressed by some big other, of course, not real God, but some imaginary agency of authority, let's call it like this. Even not power, not state power, it can be pure spiritual authority, which interpellates you into something. But this something usually means ideological identity, like you are. And then Althusser draws too much mileage, I think, tries to, from the homology between this mode of, hey, you, citizen, revolutionary, and so on, and the moment you turn and recognize yourself in the call, you are constituted as subject of ideology. Things, I think, have to be complicated here. First, we have to be very clear, as I repeat often, where are we today with this ideological interpellation? Some people would have claimed, oh, these times are over. Like, you know, till somewhere, 1990, when the Cold War still went on, until that point, we still had ideological interpellation. Like, society was addressing us with interpolating us into a certain identity, you, Democrat, Socialist, whatever. The idea is that after that we no longer have it. No, I claim we still are interpolated, but in a much more tricky way. I claim that first, okay, things get really complicated here, but it's not something abstract. I'm referring to a very concrete experience. First, I claim that if you ask, I always repeat this, I know it's not a new point. If you ask yourself, what is society demanding from me today? Of course, it's no longer some direct ideological call. It's something like what I ironically refer to as Western Buddhist hedonism. You know, enjoy, be true to yourself, but truly, authentically express yourself, find your true self, something like be authentically what you are. And I claim that this ideology is maybe the most dangerous one, because it's almost not experienced as ideology at all. But let's not go into that. My second point, and it's my friend, he somehow disappeared from public view now. Kripps, was it her name? Peter Kripps wrote, not Joseph Kripps. That's why I confused him, because Joseph Kripps was a really good Mozart conductor from 50s, 60s, and this guy is his nephew, Kripps, okay, K-R-I-P-S. He wrote, I even forgot the title of the book, an excellent book some 15 years ago, if you want to know more about this, look at my, I think, Metastasis of Enjoyment. I think there I go into it. Namely, how the proper Lacanian counterattack to Althusser should have been that simply Althusser's description of ideological subject of this, of course, it's an imagined process, but even at this formal level, that Althusser's description is not the correct one. That it doesn't work like that, you know, like, hey, you turn around, you identify yourself, you are caught. The moment you reply, the moment you recognize yourself in the call, you are the subject of ideology. Kripps does something wonderful. He says that we have to imagine a much more refined scenario where, again, even at this abstract level, when you turn around, your first reaction of each of us is hysterical. It's not when you hear, hey, you. It's not, yes, me. But it's something like, why me? What did I do to deserve it? And so on. You know, like, why me? It's this moment of doubt, of hysterical doubt, you are calling me Democrat, woman, husband. Why that? Why am I that? And this is why for Lacan, he is very precise here. Subjectivity as such is hysterical. And for reasons into which I cannot go now, I develop this widely in my books, I think that here Lacan is totally right against a certain Deleuzian, pseudo-Deleuzian, I have great appreciation for Deleuze theory, which I simplify to the utmost, opposes perversion and hysteria, as if hysteria is the feminine compromise. You know, a hysterical subject is a woman who provokes the master, but beneath this provocation, it's really a call for a stronger master or whatever. Like, a hysteric subject just provokes the master with a demand for a stronger master, while a pervert goes to the end. No, Lacan and already Freud made it very clear that a pervert is a perfect subject. That every power, the more authoritarian it is, the more it needs subjects whose libidinal economy is that of a pervert. And we don't have time to go into it now. Just to give you a quick hint, recapitulating all stuff, what is perversion for Lacan? You know, it's not, oh, I'm eating shit of other persons or whatever tells your dirty imagination. Lacan is here very refined. Perversion is for him a formal subjective position. The beautiful paradox of Lacan is that, sorry for my tasteless nature, I cannot escape it. You can eat your lover's shit, but I don't, but you are not a pervert. And you can make love in a totally, all the missionary positions you want, no, but you are a pervert. A perversion is a subjective position, which means, as Lacan puts it very precisely, you assume the position of an instrument of the other's jouissance, in the sense that, to put it in very simple terms, here I think a Stalinist, true Stalinist communist is a pervert. Not because of horrors they did, but because, you know what's the basic position of a Stalinist? We are just servants of the people, but the catch is we know better than people what people want, and even if you have to force them, you know, we will. This idea of the very modesty, I'm nothing in myself. You know, this is the difference, for example, between Stalinist and a fascist leader. The fascist leader is openly a leader. A Stalinist leader is not that. A Stalinist leader is always a servant of the people. But, of course, as such, he knows what the people really want and so on. In other words, and that's the big difference between perversion and hysteria, a pervert knows. A hysteric doesn't know. The hysterical position is questioning. The hysterical position is, and this is why, and you know why I like here Freud and Lacan? Because here they are effectively much more feminists. You know, behind this apparently critical celebration of perversion against hysteria, it's a hidden anti-feminist. I mean, I'm well aware, I did my Lacanian homework, that although traditionally it appears that women are hysterics and men are perverts, this is a very delicate question. And there are some wonderful analyses of how there is a specific position of feminine perversion, which one of the ideas is a perversion but without a fetish, you know, more but nonetheless, vaguely, it is clear that beneath this celebration of perversion against hysteria, which is compromise and so on, is precisely secret reassertion of male dominance. You know, it's like we men are true revolutionaries, we go to the end, while pervert women just play games, provoke the master, and so on and so on. First, so that's the first thing. I think that the hysterical position is the one of questioning. But then here things get really interesting. Questioning what? Questioning what I am. Here, you know, when Lacan, this is so important, that I repeat it all the time. When Lacan says, oh, the object of desire is originally missing, this is not the stupid idea of how, you know, we never know what we want, we search for a true object. No, the object which is originally missing is me, myself. That is to say, what am I for the gaze of the other? That's the original question of desire. Here, although I think Lacan did a much better job, but as a strategic compromise with the enemy, here you can maybe read a little, you are allowed from my Stalinist censorship position, to look a little bit into Jean Laplanche's essays on otherness, where he develops nicely this idea, which is a very simple one, basically, but I think convincing, that how does subjectivity emerge, if we put it in this outright naive dimensions? Imagine a small child. He feels that he or she, that he, she is something for the others, mother, father, brothers, and so on. And here already we could have gone into all these perverse classifications, like my favorite stupidity is one of a Slovene football player who, after scoring a key goal, all in tears, gave his thanks on a TV interview and said something wonderful, deeply Hegelian. He said, I want to express my gratitude to my parents, especially to my mother and father. Like as if there are some mysterious more parents, but And I think he knew what is object A. Object A is precisely that more, a parent which is neither father nor mother, I will not repeat here all that stuff, but that's why one should read. This is a wonderful topic, I claim. All these paradoxes of classification, like I think half a year ago I already spoken about Kierkegaard in, I forgot which text. He refers ironically to a famous classification of some Danish humor writer where he says all people can be divided, all humanity, into officers, housemates, and chimney sweepers. Now, it may sound an absurdity, but I think you can immediately see that there is a logic in it. Officer, typical male subjectivity, housewife, serving feminine subjectivity, and the key point is that you have to have three always, And you can imagine, now let's see if you are able to follow my really, really dirty mind. You know what's the dirtiest association that I get here? Of course, the officer is fucking housemaid, but then they didn't have a condom, so, did you guess it? A chimney sweeper comes and, cleans it. My God, think dirty a little bit. No, but seriously, this gets us into much more seriously complex matters of why even in the domain of the class struggle, you never have ruling class, the oppressed class. There must be three. Without the third element, there is no class struggle. Or as Lacan put it somewhere, the original triad is not 1, 2, 3. It's 1 plus 1 plus object A, plus this supplement, which is 1, not even 1, and so on and so on. But let's forget that and go back to this, what is subjectivity. So again, Laplanche's idea is this one. I am, as a small kid, confronted with parents, sisters, brothers, and I know already at an elementary level that I feel, experience that others are playing some libidinal games with me. Mother is using me in her manipulations against the father and vice versa and so on. Like I am the focal point, libidinal investment of others. But of course, I don't know what this identity is. And this gives rise to the original hysterical question. What I know that I am something for the others, but I can't see what. And of course, now, the next crucial step is, of course, that the parents also don't know it. And this is for Lacan, and Laplanche develops this nicely. The original experience of the unconscious is when the child knows that, as Hegel put it nicely, what I always quote, that the secrets of the Egyptians were the secrets for the Egyptians also themselves, that it's not just that parents, others are playing some games with me and I just cannot penetrate them. No, the crucial discovery and this is maybe the primordial form of what Lacan calls symbolic castration, is that the other also doesn't know. When you feel this, that the other, that you experience how your parents literally don't know what they are talking, in the sense that they are themselves caught in their own game. So again, the idea is that this is the primordial hysterical experience, and then perversion is precisely the way out. It's not more primordial. The pervert position is I know. The other doesn't know, but I know. I know perfectly what the other wants, and even if I have to kill him, I will deliver him, save him, or whatever. So, again, this tension which Kripps, that guy, wonderfully developed, this idea that when I got an interpellation, my first reaction as subject, and this reaction constitutes me as subject, is, my God, what do they want from me? That you automatically feel guilty. Like this is Althusser's story, how the policeman calls you, hey, you. The moment you turn towards him, you already identify yourself as subject of law. But Kripps adds here that no, even at an abstract level, this is not the whole story. The story is that when the policeman calls you, oh, hey, you, your reaction is, what did I do wrong? Why me? And then that you assume identity, I am, citizen, whatever, to escape this anxiety, this deadlock. You see that between the ideological call, hey, you, and my identification, there has to be this moment of uncertainty, of anxiety. So that again, and of course, it can be shown, I claim that this is what goes missing with Althusser. He talks in his great classical text, Ideology and Ideological State Apparatuses, as if this is a direct closed loop, like I directly recognize myself in it. No, perverts do it maybe, but we don't. Now you will say, but why do we react as guilty? Here is even a nicer paradox developed by Kripps. You will say, no, but some people are able to, yes, me, directly recognize. But these are usually criminals, I claim. Because, we ordinary people, that's a nice paradox, precisely who are not, in a formal legal sense, guilty, the more you are innocent, the more, when the policeman addresses you, the more anxiety explodes. Oh my God, why me? What did I do? If you are really a criminal, you know how to cover it up. Yes, policeman, what did, yes, like you gladly identify yourself. It's different logic. Okay, but let's go on. So this is, now I'm getting a little more refined, hope so. This is the first problem I claim with Althusser. He doesn't get the refinement of the process of subjectivization. The counterpoint to this is the other one. The other level of Althusserian theory of ideology is ideological state apparatuses. As already said, all this machinery of church, police, all the different apparatuses which discipline us, which train us, and so on and so on. What Althusser misses here, I claim, is what? He all the time insists on the materiality of this process. But I claim what he misses is precisely what Lacan calls the materiality of the signifier as such. He all the time has to vulgarize materiality into, incidentally, my megalomania, which Secret Service is paying, Yesterday, we had such a nice joke. He's really a normal guy privately to boast, I was for 3 hours exchanging dirty jokes, mostly with Julian Assange, And then my wife was with me doing an interview with him, And at a certain point, my wife's recording machine broke down. And you know what was our immediate reaction? No problem, we just called the British police. They have better transcripts than us. Okay, so, sorry, let me go on. So, that this eternal insistence, all the time compulsively repeats, it's a material, he precisely escapes from something, from what is really difficult to think. that we have in the big other, in what Lacan calls the symbolic machine, we have an order which is not material in the usual sense, but which nonetheless functions as an external, in this sense, material machine. This weird materiality of the signifier. How does this work? Let me quote you now a passage from Althusser's text. This is late Althusser, Philosophy of the Encounter is the book, published by Verso in 2006, late Althusser's manuscripts. Here is how Althusser answers the question, what distinguishes state from other social apparatuses. And here is the first of my long, boring quotes. What distinguishes them is that, quote, everything that operates in it, in the state, and in its, the state's name, whether the political apparatus or the ideological apparatus, is silently buttressed by the existence and presence of the public armed physical force. That this force is not fully visible or actively employed, that it very often intervenes only intermittently or remains hidden and invisible, all this is simply one further form of its existence and action. One had to make a show of one's force so as not to have to make use of it. It suffices to deploy one's military force to achieve by intimidation results that would normally have been achieved by sending it into action. We may go further and say that one can also not make a show of one's force so as not to have to make use of it. When threats of brute force or the force of law subject the authors in a given situation to obvious pressure, there is no longer any need to make a show of this force. There may be more to be gained from hiding it. The army tanks that were stationed under the trees of Rambouillet Forest, a forest in the suburbs of Paris, in May 1968 are an example. They played, by virtue of their absence, a decisive role in quelling the 68 riots in Paris. End of quote. The first thing to note here is, and I think Althusser is not attentive enough to it, is the radical difference between the two levels, the two examples that he uses. First, the idea is how can you avoid the use of direct, brutal, real force. The first thing to do, every politician, dictator knows it, is to make a show of your force. And maybe if this just spectacle, fascinating, brutal display of force is effective enough, you don't have to use it. Like, I don't know, you know, when there is a threat of demonstration, this is the standard procedure. You send police cars or maybe even tanks along, you parade them along the main boulevards of a city, and the idea is we will warn them in advance. Then something much more refined happens. The threat works when people already, the point is of course that people must suspect that you are able to mobilize some force. The most effective threat can be not to display any force, but just to keep it as a threat. And the more it is unseen, the more it grows as some kind of spectral presence. And Althusser's point, and it's true, although I was young then, I was in Paris and I remember this rumor when there were 68 clashes, that there are tens of thousands of military in Rambouillet Forest with tanks ready there. Nobody has seen them, but you know, precisely as such, they were much more threatening than effectively doing it, than effectively displaying their force. So the first thing I want to say here is that the first level would have been, let's say, imaginary. That is to say, instead of really using police force, I make a show of it. You know, police parades in the city. You can also bluff at this level. You just send some elite units and you just pretend, but nonetheless, you show it. hoping that the spectacle, not using it, of showing it, will scare people and so on. But the second level is the properly symbolic one, where the very absence of display, you know, when people expect for you to show force, of course it's a risky procedure because people may call your bluff and then they see you have nothing. But quite often it works that you don't display the force, and this makes the potential display of force even all the more ominous. And I claim that what Althusser misses is this, the true dimension of his own example. What Althusser is right to insist how not even a display of force can work in the same way as the real use of force can scare people, but how, of course, against the background of expectation of your use of force, that not displaying any force, just this absolutely ominous silence, like, this scene in many war movies, it's the elementary strategy. You expect the enemy to attack and then it's just mist and silence. Maybe you hear some sounds and so on, but nothing. And this is usually much more threatening than actually seeing the enemy soldiers. The moment you see them, it's always a kind of a relief, Oh my God, look, I see them, I know who they are, part of reality, and so on. Althusser here refers to a nice example. He compares, and this is an intelligent parallel, between this and the way he refers here to a book by Perry Anderson, where Perry Anderson talks about how gold reserves of the central banks function in our societies. The whole economy, the way it functions, needs this illusion that ultimately, at least, I don't know how it is today, in older times, that somehow, it's all ultimately supported, held up by gold bank reserves. The point is that you don't have to even to see, to take. It's just enough that everyone accepts that there are bank reserves. So again, his idea is that it's the same with secret, with these hidden military forces which sustain the rule of law. It's enough the awareness that they are there. But here I claim things get problematic. First, if we take precisely this example of gold reserves, yes, they are there hidden. But what we all know, and that's the mystery, is that it's not only, I hope you will get the point, and I'm blaming me if I sound confused, it's not only that they work, gold reserves, also, or even if they are not put to use. I claim they work only insofar as they are not put to use. The moment the state would have actively to intervene with gold reserves, usually everything crashes because you never have enough of it, and so on and so on. So this is, I think, a wonderful example of what Lacan calls, he plays in his anxiety seminar, of this ambiguity of toute puissance, omnipotence, and toute impuissance, all in potency. That omnipotence, it's always only a potential threat. The moment you actualize it, it's over. You see, what Althusser, again, doesn't get is that he is right that you don't have to show brutally your force, that it works good, even if you don't show it, not even show it. What he doesn't get is that it only works in this way. The moment, imagine a really tense situation where those in power decide to really fully use the force against their own population. I don't imagine even one example where it really worked. It's usually the point of impotence. It's too much. First, in a crazy way, it diminishes the threat. Because, again, the threat functions as the spectral real precisely insofar as it remains invisible. The moment you see it, it's part of reality. You say, oh, it's only those guys, and so on and so on. The threat diminishes. So, and I claim, again, it's the same with gold reserves. You know what's the nice paradox of gold reserves? I read one book about social paradoxes which goes into this. Let's imagine a situation where there would have been something like in James Bond Goldfinger. Let's say they're no longer there, but let's say that almost they are not, I know. Almost all gold reserves are in Fort Knox. Let's say some terrorist or whoever, although I would have supported them here, would explode an atomic bomb in Fort Knox, rendered all the gold there unusable for, I don't know, hundreds of years. Unusable in the simple sense that because of radiation, nobody can get close to it. But if people would have agreed that this continues to function as a reference, although totally without use, it would still have functioned. You see, this is what interests me. A power which works, but only as a threat. The moment it actualizes itself, it no longer works. And in last years, I've often used also the example of paternal authority. You know, a true father never beats you. A true father just threatens you. And the most effective threat is not even shouting, threatening to beat you, but just a kind of a cold gaze or whatever, you know. Because an intelligent father is deeply aware that the moment he really beats you, it can hurt, but it's basically an admission of impotence, you know. A true authority doesn't have to beat you. The moment you beat your son, you are lost, I claim. Lost in the sense that, not in the sense that morally lost for beating the son. What do I care? Children are evil embodied. I know, but what I'm saying is that you lose your authority, precisely. No? And you can see this. I had a conflict with whom? I forgot. I think with Avital Ronell and Judith Butler once here years ago, when I claimed that Kafka's letter to his father, they claimed it's horrible, the paternal authority. I claim no, and I challenge you to do it. Read Kafka's famous letter to his father. The reproach is not you are too terrorizing. No, the reproach is you are a ridiculous fake. It's a big call, be a proper authority. He is ridiculing the father for not being a proper authority. So, okay, let's go on. So what I'm claiming here is that, is that the same goes for, let's take an apparent direct use of brutal force, which probably is the first one which explodes in your mind. The famous, my God, now it's almost 30 years of what? Tiananmen, China. It's absolutely crucial, I think, that it was done in this spectral way during the night, absolutely no traces and so on. They were very intelligent to do it. I think it was not just that, you know, it would have been a little bit awkward for them to have a communist, formally people's regime smashing, killing their citizens in hundreds with tanks. It's that precisely in this way, not to allowing it to enter ordinary reality. Something happened during the night, no one knows what, and so on. They did it very intelligently, I think. It's simply, it has a pure spectral identity, in the sense of everyone knows something horrible happened there. But no one knows what happened. It's an absolute blackout and so on. And here you can play wonderful games. For example, my friend Wang Hui, whom I met, showed me a photo. It's a wonderful one. I like this type of provocations, so they are cheap provocations. Do you know that in 48, 49, when communists were winning, formally they played political games, their demand against Kuomintang was that Kuomintang wants to rule alone as a party. And they claimed we communists stand not only for ourselves, but for all other parties. So one of Mao's slogans, which communists displayed in their demonstrations, is 48, was no to one-party rule, you know, of Kuomintang. So a dissident, a friend of Wang Hui, did something. He walked along Tiananmen, the big square, with a large poster, no to one-party rule, and then beneath Mao Zedong, quote. He disappeared immediately. They didn't hear him. Just a quote from Mao Zedong, my God, you know. Okay. So, nonetheless, let me go on. So, what I want to say is that what, again, Althusser doesn't see is what is the status of this threat of real power? It is not only symbolic, it is real, but it's a purely virtual real. It's not reality. He doesn't see that precisely it not only works even if it is absent, but it works only if it's not fully actualized. The moment the state fully strikes against its own people, usually it falls apart. For example, Ceausescu tried it in Romania. Total mobilization and so on, everything fell apart and so on and so on. And I think this is what so-called totalitarian regimes are well aware of. You see, this is a nice example of the power of appearances. I always emphasized it as against the usual stupid common sense, which is in the West, we were manipulated appearances, while under communist totalitarianism, it was just the brutal force. No, I claim communist regimes were brutal, killing millions, blah, blah. But at the same time, they were much more clinging to appearances. They behaved as if appearances disintegrate a little bit, everything will fall apart. Precisely, again, as totalitarian, they feared, they did cling much more to appearances. I think I can tell you an old story which I used in some of my old books. I remember when I was member of a small half-dissident journal, we published a poem by some stupid poet where there was one line which vaguely, if you read it in a very paranoiac way, hinted at something that the true fathers of our freedom are not communists, whatever, but not in this direct way. There was an extraordinary session of the Cultural Committee of the Communist Party. They reacted in a total panic. And here I can understand what, and I take it quite seriously, not just as a sarcastic joke, what I think Joseph Brodsky says, that at no point in human history did they appreciate poetry as much as in Stalinist times, you know. Because only there, for one wrong word, they were ready to kill and so on. Can you imagine this? The communist state, whole police apparatus and so on, they were thrown into a panic for one short poem in one small, shitty, like 400 copies, cultural magazine, which no one read. They even didn't notice that by making a special session of Cultural Committee, they brought the danger. Then all the people started to talk about it, photocopies started to circulate. If they were to do nothing, nothing would have happened. Nobody would have even noticed it, no? So again, the big enigma of Stalinism is this total fear of losing face, of disintegration of appearances. And it's wonderful in China how this still works. For example, Wang Hui also told me that, you know who is the seat of real power in China? Not even Politburo, but 9, now there are 7 members. It's called Standing Committee of the Politburo. That's it. That's power. Not only is the election of that body totally mysterious, there is absolutely no debate, you know, like even these formals, you know, even under Stalinism. For example, Stalin was proposed to be the next general secretary, and then every communist cell had to debate it. Of course, they all supported it, but this they went to the motion so that then they could have said, after a wide debate, members of the party proposed Stalin. No, it's absolutely, with all my provisos, it's absolutely, not only absolutely, it's like this. Okay, you have every 4 years the Congress, whatever, fuck it, Communist Party, which is in itself, Chinese are really masters of this distinction missed by Althusser. Did I tell you, I wrote about it, a wonderful detail. Do you know that the Chinese Communist Party doesn't exist legally? a wonderful story I was told in China. A dissident went to a court, I like these naive gestures, went to a court denouncing Communist Party for crimes in the Great Leap Forward and so on, for killing millions of people. After 2-3 months, he got an answer, which was, sorry, but we didn't find any organization legally enrolled with legal that fits the name Chinese Communist Party. It literally doesn't exist. That is to say, of course it exists, but like literally it's prohibited to ask, with all other organizations, you have all these usual bureaucratic communist details, You have to enroll, register properly, blah, blah, blah. Communist Party doesn't exist. And especially for this standing committee of the Politburo, it's like this. Every 4 years, Congress of the Communist Party, the last day, this is of course the orgasmic final moment, everyone is waiting for it, 7 new members of the standing committee are presented to the people. And of course then there is a formal vote, but it's always absolutely a unanimous vote. But if you raise the question, okay, who has chosen them? It's a prohibited question. Okay, they do it in a Chinese style. They say it's very impolite to ask this question and so on. Of course, everyone knows that there must be immense behind-the-stage factional struggles and so on. But it's totally out of public view. Out of nowhere, the 7 are presented. And now I come to that mystical moment of appearances. I wonder if you noticed it. I didn't. I only noticed it after my attention was drawn to it. How they are always, if you look at them, well-looking with black, thick hair. This absolute order, they are formally forbidden to appear weak. They have to tan their skin. If they are losing hair, they get transplants and so on and so on. And this is the mystery of appearances. Of course, everybody knows, my God, they cannot really look so good. They are guys 70, some of them even 80 years old, but they know that appearances matter. And I think I already told you once this other wonderful anecdote that I read about Soviet Union. Did you wonder, if you look at old documentaries, reels, news, why in October and especially 1st of May military parades on the Red Square in the time of Soviet Union, why it never rained? Because they used some special, very poisonous, but who cares if then people are poisoned, gases which they spread above Moscow to prevent cloud formations and so on, because they were afraid that if a storm or a rain ruins the parade, people will somehow experience this as nature mocking the communist rule limit of the party power. So it was absolutely necessary that, it has to go the way it does. So again, don't underestimate the force of appearances. But back to Althusser. And here, but I have a certain respect for this attitude, because I don't have time to go into it now. But what is happening now is that those in power, except in China and so on, no longer function like that. Like, as already, I think, improvised once in front of you, take someone like, for example, in United States, I met recently, and I don't boast about it, I don't agree with him politically, he is way too naive, but Oliver Stone, and he asked me the usual narcissist artistic question, which of my movies do you really like? I told him, when we take power, my usual answer, you will get your re-education camp for this type of questions, no? But the point is that I told him Nixon. I told him frankly, I don't like your big iconic movies because they're boring. They all tell the same boring Oedipal story. Wall Street. Bad father, Michael Douglas, who is incidentally the only interesting guy in the movie, no? Against Martin Sheen's his own father played, which is the good father. Even Platoon, a couple of his films, he's really obsessed by this struggle between good and bad father and the good father winning, no? But you know what I like in Nixon? He didn't fall into this simple Nixon phobia. First, every authentic American leftist will tell you, don't underestimate Nixon. If you measure progressive character of a president by how much money, what percentage and so on was given to welfare, to unemployed, to free education, you know that Richard Nixon is by far the most progressive American president. Because of economic crisis, although I like him much more as a person, already Jimmy Carter had to start reducing it. Point two, Nixon nonetheless did a trip to China for which he was never forgiven by the radical American right and so on and so on. So, you know, I never bought that bullshit, all the president's men, you know, like two ordinary. This is the worst capitalist propaganda, movies like All the President's Men, because they appear critical. Oh my God, even our president is corrupted. But the true message of the film is, of course, what a great country we are. Two ordinary guys can overthrow the mightiest man in the world. No, I say, sorry, impolite again. I say, fuck you here, you know. Like, it's crucial that a strong part of American establishment had to endorse this, let Nixon draw. And I, again, and yes, why then do I think Anthony Hopkins plays Nixon? Because he consciously, here Oliver Stone was not totally stupid. He presents Nixon as the last genuinely tragic, Oedipal, let's call it like this, president. He really wanted greatness, it fell down, it was he was a crook, of course, but nonetheless. But with Reagan, Carter is complicated, transitory phenomenon. With Reagan and on, we have a totally different function of a kind of a Teflon presidency where even if Reagan tried to be, you know, if we have already self-ironic presidents who make fun of themselves and so on. For example, I remember, I saw it, one of Reagan's press conferences where, this was one of the few, then he stopped giving them because he appeared too stupid, but it was a journalist asked him a complicated economic question, and he said, why are you asking me this question? You know that I'm too stupid to answer you without preparation. You know, this open mocking his own limitation, something broke down with dignity. And I think Clinton played the same game, not to mention Bush and so on. It's a kind of very obscene, open display of stupidity. And I think then Berlusconi in Europe plays the same and so on. And I don't think there is anything great democratic in it, no? I think it's a much more perverse functioning. I'm tempted to say for the Chinese approach, no? Show us some respect by at least appearing, not the bullshit that you really are, but make an effort to look with some dignity, whatever, no? Sorry, so let me go on. So, you see, on the one hand, I try to develop, now back to Althusser, how he doesn't see that more complex process of subjectivization. On the other hand, with regard to material state apparatuses, I claim, what again he doesn't see is that what he tries to capture as, this is the real me, you know, this is the real me, you know, oh my God. I came to this reversal. I used in one book this, you know, how my double is ordered. I think, I may be wrong, that the first story in the second year of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, that early black and white TV shows, it shocked even me because I didn't know it. I'm sorry for a little, it's a story, the woman, I think is played by Jessica Tandy, you know, the mother from Hitchcock's Birds. But she's a good actress. She also played in the original version of Samuel Beckett's Not I. She played the mouth, no? And she plays a lone, desperate spinster who is obsessed by a, how do you call this, ventriloquist with a dummy. And she goes every evening to his performance, and when it is the last performance, she cannot restrain herself. She goes up on stage and addresses him, touching him here, like offering herself to him. And then comes the shock. I was shocked. You know what you discover? That the true dummy was the real large person. Out of the small dummy, a midget, a dwarf, steps out. So that it was the other way around, you see. And it is something terrifying about it, so that, you know, what you thought was dead was alive, what you thought was alive was dead. Okay, that was my experience. Like, the real me is that squeaking voice, squeezing voice that was there. But, okay, back to that. So, on the one hand, we have that shortcut with subjectivization. On the other hand, we have, what does Althusser miss? You saw. What he tries to circumscribe, discern as the materiality of ideology, that it's precisely not the materiality. It's what Lacan calls the materiality of signifier, of a letter. You can cut it into small pieces, it remains the letter it is, and so on. So his idea being of Lacan, that of course Lacan doesn't mean here materiality in the sense you touch it, but materiality in the sense of a blind machine-like order. And this is the Lacanian big other. It's, as it were, the materiality of the ideal order itself. And this, I think, is always, in critique of idealism, even theology, the most subversive moment. Not to prove that everything is matter, but to prove that even what we perceive as God functions like mechanical matter. That's why, as I already repeated here often, my favorite theologist is Nicolas Malebranche. You know what he does? He elaborates the notion of mercy, but a kind of literally materialist notion of mercy. Sorry for repeating myself, but his idea is this one. Of course, he is on the line of Jansenism, which means for him, grace has nothing to do with mercy. You know, no, sorry, with virtue. You can be a good guy doing wonderful things, but you may be not blessed by mercy, you will burn in hell. Or you can murder, kill, poison, whatever. You are touched by mercy, you are redeemed. Incidentally, do you know that French communists referred openly to Malebranche in their critique of bourgeois ideology? For them, virtue meant small bourgeois values. And their idea was, you can be an honest small bourgeois caring for the poor people, but if you are not touched by mercy, by the mercy of having insight into Communist Party role and so on, you are lost and so on. No? So, but what I want to say is this, that then Malebranche, I'm literally quoting him, almost, okay, but my point is I'm not inventing, this is his example. He says, I'm sorry if I repeat myself, you know it. Imagine two farmers. One works diligently all the time on his field. The other one nearby is a lazy guy, throws on some seed, but nothing really. But then it can happen because of contingent natural processes that the bad farmer, lazy, gets all the rain, the good one gets none. So that the bad one will get some harvest, the good one nothing. And you know what he says? He said exactly the same is with divine grace. It's that God is just in a totally contingent way throwing it around. Absolutely nothing to do with our virtues and so on. But incidentally, I think even from the religious standpoint, this is the only correct way. Because as every good Protestant, and you know Protestants as a rule believe in predestination, you know why this is good? Because if you think that your good works, good deeds, will bring you salvation, it becomes a commercial transaction, you know. Basically, the dealing is, oh, I may be damned, but let's make a transaction. If I do a little bit of a good work, maybe I will get grace, you know. It's no longer a pure ethical act. The only good act is when you say, I will do what I do without counting that this will affect in any way my salvation. That precisely predestination, far from sabotaging your ethical achievement, is opening the only true space for ethical achievement. But okay, so again, you see, this is what I find so subversive in Malebranche. He shows how even the spiritual domain of grace functions like mechanical materialism, if you want, like this. No? And that's the point of Lacan. When Lacan speaks about the autonomy of the signifier, it doesn't mean that these words printed here materially are autonomous. It means that the symbolic system network on which we rely functions in a materialist way on its own, but precisely as the ideal order. Of course, the symbolic order is an ideal order. It's not reality, but as such, it can function in a materialist way. And this, again, this point, I claim, is missed by Althusser. Who elaborated, sorry, let's see where we are.
Another 10 minutes, you said.
Looks bad. Okay. Who, no, okay, I will then just try to recapitulate what I'm saying. First, I really advise you to read this Kant. For a long time, Immanuel Kant, and I'm not now changing the terrain, because this materiality of the signifier in tradition, philosophical, our Western tradition, I think it's Kant's late writing from 1798, Anthropology from a Pragmatic Point of View, which develops it in detail. You can get it, it's in one of those Cambridge or Oxford, edition with many other texts. It's immensely readable, it's excellent. Kant's problem is what? First, in his critique of pure reason, he developed pure ethical structure, and with all this ethical rigorism. It only counts as an ethical act if it's done for the sake of duty, not for some pathological profit, and so on and so on. So we have critique of pure, we have ethics. Then, under the pretext of just anthropology is for Kant ethics, but like applied to real empirical life, to humans as empirical objects. How does it function there? My God, I'm getting tired of this science of the big other, whatever, no? Although things happen, I had, maybe someone did it, but they claimed that when I was in high school, I was in a cinematheque in Ljubljana, Slovenia, and we were watching a horror movie, and exactly at midnight, when some ghosts were supposed to appear, it was also midnight in real time, all the lights went out and so on, and... okay, but let's stop. What I'm saying is that, why is this so mysterious? Because Michel Foucault, who, in his introduction to the French translation of Kant's Anthropology, he was the first to emphasize the key position of this text. He is too short. He simply uses it as a proof that Kant is caught into what he calls already in The Order of Thing, the transcendental empirical duality doublet. You know how Kant is forced to observe human beings from two perspectives, as transcendental, pure, free subjects, and as empirical natural entities, and how Kant is not able to bring the two together. So that Kant has to oscillate between the two without being able to really reduce one to the other. Of course, Kant is not a naturalist, so he is forbidden to translate transcendental subject into empirical history, how it emerged out of nature, but also the opposite one, like Kant admitted that we are caught in concrete social circumstances. You cannot develop this out of pure practical reason, out of pure morality. But Foucault remains at this level, just tension between transcendental, empirical. But what Foucault doesn't get is that the domain that Kant develops here in anthropology is, of course, it's not pure reason. It's empirical circumstances. But it's also not empirical in the sense of facts. It's precisely what we today would have called performative dimension of social interaction. Kant is obsessed, he develops this in detail, by the idea that although at a transcendental level you are free as a non-empirical, transcendental, nominal simply means not submitted to empirical, material causality fact. But nonetheless, that empirically, in social life, for us to become moral, social rules, etiquette condition you to this. But here Kant knows better than Althusser that these social rules are not simply empirical rules. Kant, is not talking simply about empirical training. He talks precisely about moral appearance. He endorses fully something that in his pure ethics should be prohibited. For example, one in the subdivisions of his anthropology, subchapters, is called On Permissible Moral Appearance, shine, appearance. What Kant is developing in all possible ways is that precisely this motive that Althusser repeats all the time following Pascal, that even if you are, like, from strict morality, do you have the right to pretend that you are honest even or moral even if you are not? The traditional position would have been this is the most disgusting thing. You just pretend to be moral. But Kant again and again tries to develop how the only way to morality is that you begin by acting as if you are moral. And then there is a hope that you will fall into your own trap. Let me just read you nonetheless a little bit of Kant here. On the whole, the more civilized human beings are, the more they are actors. They adopt the illusion of affections, of respect for others, of modesty, and of unselfishness without deceiving anyone at all, because it is understood by everyone that nothing is meant sincerely by this. And it is also very good that this happens in the world. For when human beings play these roles, eventually the virtues whose illusion they have merely affected will gradually really be aroused and merge into the disposition. To deceive the deceiver in ourselves, the inclinations, is a return again to obedience under the law of virtue, and is not a deception, but rather a laudable illusion or cheating, Täuschung of ourselves. In order to save virtue, or at least lead the human being to it, nature has wisely implanted into us humans the tendency to willingly allow ourselves to be deceived. Good, honorable decorum is an external appearance that instills respect for others, and so on and so on. So, okay, I will not go to it, but you see what Kant is here wonderfully saying, that the logic of morality is you should begin by deceiving others in the sense of, I am really evil, but to deceive you that I'm kind, I act like that, and then ultimately, without even knowing, the deceiver deceives himself. I become moral, but so he praises here empty coquetry, gallantry, and so on, endlessly. And what is so interesting here is that Kant is here discovering a domain which is neither the domain of pure inner morality, like looking to inside, or external legality. You know, and to make a jump, this is what I find so problematic, for example, in political correctness. The basic feature of our customs is that we, on the one hand, we have things, strict moral orders, what you are ordered to do, like, don't kill, don't lie, whatever. There it's clear. Then we have external legality, like, it's not punishable, not yet, one never knows, to directly lie or whatever. But there are things which simply you are not allowed to do. And of course, the space of our freedom is between the two. There are things that you are not allowed to do morally, and there are things that you are legally prohibited to do. But in between, there are things which, although they are not truly moral, they are also not prohibited by the law, cheating a little bit, and so on and so on. So my point is that what Kant does is open up a domain of things, and the whole point is that they have to exist, namely things which only are operative if you are expected to do them without being explicitly ordered to do them. That's the essence of politeness. It doesn't work if you are ordered to do it, like to show gallantry. The whole point is that it shouldn't be experienced as you, a lady, and you say, okay, I will help you, but really I would like to I don't know, to put my feet so that you would sleep down over there. You know, like you have to pretend that I could not have done it, I'm not really forced to do it, but it's expected from me to do it. This domain, I claim, tends to disappear with political correctness. What political correctness tries to do is precisely to directly legalize or moralize this gray domain. No? It's like to legalize in the sense of, I don't know, if I look at you in this way, it can already be harassment or whatever. It somehow, it tries to legalize what precisely has to appear as your politeness, which, again, even if you are expected to obey it, it must appear as if you freely obey it. So again, Kant discovers here a domain which is really a subversive one, and I think, but I don't have time to develop it now, I think it works also. Yeah, I know, we are there.
No,
yeah.
I thought you wanted to stop at
Yeah, but I lied. What's so strange about it? I lied. We got her. No, sorry. What I want to say immediately, I'm sorry. What I wanted to say is that also Kant says here some very interesting thing about domination, servitude, and so on, where he said that the same goes for domination and servitude. He makes some funny remarks which may appear only obscenities, but which are very profound ones about the ambiguity of patriarchal domination, where he says that when men dominate women, it's expected for women not to simply turn into instruments that you totally surrender your freedom, whatever you know. That there must be always this gray domain in the sense of, okay, I'm your servant, but I'm freely choosing to be your servant or whatever. A weird intermediate domain emerges here. So again, what Kant sees here is that this Pascal formula, you know, Pascalian formula, bless Pascal, when he says, you know, the famous statement, if you don't believe, act as if you believe, your knees pray, and at the end you will believe. That it's a much more complex process. It's not simply you follow an external machine and your spirit will follow. No, it's a much more complex topic of deception and so on. Here, I cannot refrain from referring to one of my books where I developed this, of how I even think that, in a way, Pascal is up to a point wrong here. It can be said that today, and this is how, if you read him really closely, a little bit between the lines, this would have been Hegel's answer to Pascal. That no, it's not that you don't believe, you follow the ritual, and then maybe you will believe. What if we have the opposite process? You really believe, but you find your belief too oppressive. So then you say, I will start to follow external ritual so that I will be able to say, okay, fuck it, I did my duty of belief, and then this will set me free for my spirit to wander, for not experiencing my belief as so oppressive. Where does Hegel enter here? This is how, as I developed in my big fat book, which weighs 2 pounds, which is why it is called Less Than Nothing, because it certainly doesn't weigh less than nothing, no? About Hegel's theory of marriage. There are some hints that he was an old Berlin pervert, no? That his theory is, to put it in a Pascalian line of argumentation, you are passionately in love. Well, get married with the lady, and then love will get an external ritual, and you will sooner or later get bored by it, and it will give you freedom and so on. So that it's not get married, the traditional version would have been get married and love will emerge. But the ritual functions also in the exactly opposite way. Are you too passionately in love? Well, get married and you will get rid of your love, Instead of love, you will get this external ritual which always gives you some freedom. And I think this even works. I spoke with some Japanese friends who told me that how they feel Western people are stupid when Western people reproach them for, your power relations are so formalized, like you are not allowed to criticize if you are just an assistant, your professor up there. And they told me, no, precisely this obeying to external circumstances sets free their mind much more than this terrible Western pressure, like be sincere, tell it, and so on. I think that, in a way, social ritual, in the sense of lying out of politeness, can be a very liberating experience. I mean, isn't it, for example, it's not my situation now, but if you are married, isn't it nice to be able to tell to your wife or husband, yeah, I love you, which means, okay, the ritual is satisfied, so fuck off. So, give me my freedom, And I think you cannot be directly free. You have to have this mediation. Okay, I shortened this one a lot, then I had another whole line of thought. I'm sorry, I don't have it, which would have been the crucial one, sorry. About 2 minutes. No, I'm not ready. Wait, you will wait long. Take a Coke or whatever. No, seriously, it's a nice point. I wanted to go into this, my eternal debate with Badiou, that Badiou is here close to Althusser, although in a totally different sense. For him, subject is defined as an exception of fidelity to an event. And for him, evil, or if you betray a cause, is a secondary mode. Like the true subject is fidelity to a cause, love, freedom, science, whatever. I claim, and I'm here a good Christian, Kierkegaard developed this idea that the initial constitutive experience of subjectivity is boredom, or the scene of, how do you call it, accedia, laziness, or whatever. That original scene, which is the Althusserian scene. I think the way to Sorry?
Lassitude.
Yeah, but I think the way to formulate is, I don't take my interpellation seriously. Because this is why some medieval authors claim that this is the most horrible scene. It's the scene of, it's easy to say, I'm evil, I don't know what is good. But this scene means, I know what is good, but nonetheless, I don't give a damn about, you are not ready to engage yourself. But I think we should not take this as secondary. That would be the way as a Lacanian or Hegelian, I would have put it that. We are what you would have called human animals. Then you get bored. And boredom comes first. Then you invent a cause to get out of boredom. What do I mean by this? You have a wonderful, it's an orgy, passage, I don't have time to read it to you now, from Kierkegaard, where he goes into how the whole history of the world, creation, is the story of boredom. God was bored, he created the world. Adam was bored, God created Eve for him. And then, I don't know, Babylonians were bored, they built the tower, and so on and so on. And I think we can do it even now, like in feudalism it gets bored, capitalists start to travel and so on and so on, but you see what I'm saying here, that I don't, Badiou, and even now more and more, he emphasizes, he calls this the positive approach, that evil or whatever bad is just a failure, a betrayal of positive goodness. I remain here a Hegelian. I claim no. I claim that it's only boredom or this accedia, laziness, that creates the space for creativity. This is the nothingness which opens up the space. And I have here a much more detailed development, but you will read it in my next book if you want, on how this changes the whole topic of subjectivity. I claim that the original subjectivity, we are back at Althusser, is not the engaged subjectivity, but it's precisely the disengaged subjectivity, like this accedia, withdrawal. And then you need this empty space of laziness or whatever, which can then be filled in by engagement or whatever. You know, again, it's the Hegelian point that negativity creates the space for, but we don't have time to do it now. So now I, under brutal feminine pressure of the most evil maternal superego.
Not as bad as Costas.
You're not as bad because you are worse. Okay.
Good. But also, actually, what you just finished on, I will look forward to that because it's exactly the, that makes women, the women who, the eternal negativity and the lassitude that characterizes the so-called depressed woman is more likely to lead to her having an ethical subjectivity in the form that you are discussing it than...
No, I totally agree with you. I think that this is wonderful, that the origin of humanity is, for me, a depressed woman.
Exactly.
Which is why I like so much David Lynch's films. Did you notice that the central problem, for example, what's the central problem of the big classic, but it doesn't work today, it's not as good, at least my experience. Blue Velvet. Isabella Rossellini, it's a depressed woman, totally immobilized. And I think one crazy way to read that film is that all guys who jump around her, even the evil